Happy Sunday, everyone. Welcome to my show where it really is okay to not be okay. I'm Rae Bonney, a workplace mental health specialist, steadfastly dedicated to bringing much needed attention to men and boys' issues, especially around crisis and suicide prevention. In my spare time, I work in private practice with almost anyone and don't mind taking the mic to speak about all things mental health, men and being change. It's not every girl's dream job, but hey, remember, men also matter. Now, last time on air was way back in September, chatting with workplace mental health champion and musical maestro Mike Hagan. Good morning, Mike. I know you're tuning in this morning. Thank you very much. Now, we just learned, Mike and I, back then in September, that Geelong were facing Sydney for their first ever meeting in an AFL Grand Final or VFL Grand Final. And let's just say it didn't end very well for the Swannies. And of course, one of the biggest world events occurred when we farewelled Queen Elizabeth II, UK's longest serving monarch, who died at Balmoral, aged 96. Anyway, today, as always, I continue to unwrap one of the greatest gifts going around, and that is people. Layer by layer, we explore the thoughts, experiences, achievements and challenges of ordinary people bound to inspire the best you. So turn up the radio. The time is just 3 minutes past 10 and we just heard from one of 3WBC's Italian favourites, and that's Tony Fidolani with, you guessed it, The Italian Show. It didn't understand a bloody word of what he said, but it felt really good to listen to. So thanks, Tony, and also thanks for all the great shout outs for my show as well. And today we're actually celebrating a number of things that are very close to my heart. First being International Men's Day, which fell yesterday on the 19th of November. It's recognised in around 80 countries worldwide, but doesn't really get nearly enough recognition as it deserves. But secondly, and even more importantly, today's guest is probably one of the most qualified people I know who can speak on this topic. His name is Ken Lyons, and he's no stranger to the 3WBC studios and has spent almost an entire century, that's right, folks, an incredible 98 years this man has graced the earth. I'm incredibly fortunate to be loved by Ken and have been recipient of his wisdom, enthusiasm and boundless energy for so many years. So today is all hats off in a tribute to a man who truly has and continues to make the world a better and much more colourful and interesting place. Welcome to the show, Ken.
Thank you very much. Yes, it's very nice to be here.
It's so lovely to have you back. We haven't been across the panel from each other for a couple of years now, so I was pretty excited about today.
Has been a while. Has been a while. And I'm feeling a little bit opposite to what I usually feel when I sit down here and sit on the wrong side of the desk.
Well, we're going to do a bit more of an introduction. Just pull your microphone a little closer to you so you're not having to lean over. But I remember back in the years where you and I used to do quite a bit of radio together, and you were very, very possessive of the panel. And yeah, you weren't letting me near any of that. So the tables are literally turned today. But happy International Men's Day from yesterday.
It's quite amazing that 80 countries will be listening in to this particular broadcast, which is amazing.
Well, I hope it's 80 countries, but it's more like 80 countries participate in International Men's Day. And that's not nearly enough countries, but we can talk about that later in this show. But what I did want to ask you right from the get-go, Ken Lyons, what does it feel like being you today?
At the moment, if I can say, a little nervous, but otherwise, no, I'm quite excited about talking about Men's Day because I happen to be a man. And that's a big start.
Yes.
It gives me something to work on. And also I think it's a very important, your program is a very important program because it gives a lot of very relevant information And that's what people are looking for today is
Well,
some
all the
answers.
beautiful information. I'm so fortunate to have guests just like you every month over the years to, share their experiences and insights, which, it's not about me, it's always about them. So that's why this show, I think, is so fortunate. But I wanted to talk a little bit about how we actually met. And it was probably about 8 years ago. And I visited my local member of parliament to say, hey, we need to be doing something about men's health in our community, because I think community is a really great place to start with change. And my local member of parliament said, Rae, if I go and talk about men's health in parliament, I'll be kicked out. No one wants to hear about men's health. So I thought, okay, then I've got to think of another platform I can get to talk about these issues. So I contacted John Farmer, who was then our station manager back in that time, and God bless you, John Farmer. He sadly passed away. It was a couple of years ago now.
Would be that, yes.
Yeah.
Quite a shock for all of us here.
Yeah, it was.
And a lovely man.
Very, very special man. So special, in fact, that he emailed me and he said, I'm putting you in touch with Ken Lyons. And back then you had a show called Here's Health.
Correct.
You did, yes.
That's right, yes.
I'm going to lean across the panel because I'm going to push your microphone. I just smacked him in the face with a microphone because he's leaning over just about.
Well, normally I have a voice that is easily heard.
It is.
And so I don't get too close to the mic.
No, but I want you to sit up straight so you're breathing properly and your posture's good. That's right. And he's just about to put his headphones off as well. Anyway, so then John said, get in contact with Ken. So you rang me, and it was actually on my birthday that you rang me. And I was with the kids at Crown. We were staying at Crown overnight, and you said, would you like to come on my show? And I was so excited. I remember my whole community of people were tuning into this. It was about 5 minutes I was on air to begin with, and that's where our conversation started. And it's not stopped for all those years.
That's true. And I think today, because of the difference of you being on the right side of the microphone and on the other side, it's a totally different feeling for me.
Yes.
And probably in a way for you too, because we haven't been together on the microphones for, as you said, a couple of years now.
Yes. We've been certainly on the other ends of the telephone, which has had its challenges as well, with your microphone dying on your phone. And but I'm glad that you're feeling a little bit more relaxed. And
oh, well, yeah, I feel fine.
And I knew it would only take about 5 minutes. But we were talking before we came on air after Tony's wonderful show about our love for radio. And you were talking about an instance when you were first on radio that you were never nervous your first time on.
No, I wasn't. And I think this is pretty natural to very young people who don't feel nervous in front of a microphone. We see that quite often at public events and things like that. So we were different.
And it was, you mentioned a casual 80 years ago when you first went on air.
Yeah, well, I started on radio when I was 13, and I've loved it ever since. And I loved it before I went on radio, by listening to it. I used to have a crystal set. Some people would not know what a crystal set was. It's something you could make in a few minutes if you had the parts, and listen into static, because that's mainly what it was. And occasionally you would hear a voice, and that would be very exciting. So those days, of course, that's very, very early in the... as I said, I was around.
Did you make your own crystal set?
Yes. Oh, yes. We needed a thing called a condenser. Anyone, I don't suppose there's too many people that today that were alive when we were making crystal sets. But anyway, they worked, and we used to listen to the cricket, and the cricket between England and Australia when it was played in Melbourne, but then again it was played in other states, so they had to mock the thing so that it sounded real, and the commentators would actually use a pencil to hit the deck. I don't know whether I can do it here, but
We have
I
it.
won't
I
try.
don't have a pencil.
I don't think.
Just smash your glasses on there.
Just it would be a little click like.
Yeah.
No, I won't try it. But the idea was that that's the sound of the ball hitting the bat.
Oh, right.
It was a pencil on a desk
Yeah.
like that, something like that.
Yeah.
And-
And there were other sound effects too, weren't there?
Yeah, oh yes, crowd effects.
Yes.
Noisy crowds and things like that.
I
And they
think you
still
told me
use it.
about one once where there was a rustling of paper that meant something, or some little effect that was very common that was just a household.
A fire,
Yes.
you know how they used to do, because I was mixed up in a lot of plays in those days. And in order to get a fire sound of a fire, you use straw and you scrunched it in front of the microphone. And you can hear the
Yeah, yeah.
crackling of the fire.
Yeah.
And of course, doors opening and closing.
Yeah.
That was they'd mock one up and make and build it, and so that it sounds like it's a door
Yes.
and all that. But they were, and then from 3DB, which was the radio station I did that broadcast from, I got an opportunity of actually. I'm jumping ahead a bit here.
No.
Because I'm a pharmacist, and I had 3 pharmacies at one stage, and one of those, apparently, one of the radio stations contacted me, and they sent somebody out, and they wanted to sell me space for advertising on radio. And so they said, if you like, because I said, oh yeah, I'd be very interested in that. And he said, well, perhaps you'd like to come in and do it yourself. And I said, yes, I would love that. So 3AK was the radio station. And so I used to go in and do the commercials for my own pharmacies. Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
And so all that, and radio has been sort of part of me ever since I was 13.
You know, I'm just sitting
I think
here.
I've got a bit older since.
A touch, but I'm just sitting here watching you and listening to you, and just seeing how much joy is in your face, and you really do have a very good radio voice, Ken.
Oh, thank
You
you.
really do. It's great.
You're very kind. But I do really, I love it. And I've had a break away from it for a while. And being back in the studio here, I feel so much at home. And having a lovely co-presenter, as I have at the moment, then it makes it even more exciting for me.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, I've always loved being on air with you. We don't have to script anything. It's all very natural and organic. So, they've got so much to get through on the show today, which I'm really excited about, unwrapping all the bits of Ken. But you travelled here from Brighton this morning, all the way from Brighton, which is
It's beautiful, downtown Brighton.
yes.
It is a lovely suburb, actually.
Yes. Well, this is all about me now. I was at a beautiful wedding last night, the marriage of Jade and Gary, and very, very dear friends of mine, out at a place called the Stones in the Yarra Valley. Incredibly, incredibly beautiful. And I sat next to a firefighter. And that was very interesting. And his girlfriend is also a firefighter.
They're very brave people.
Yes.
Take terrible risks, but they are they're professionals. They're professional firefighters.
Correct.
People don't realise, I think, that not everyone has just got a hose in their hand and run outside and see if they can put the fire out.
That's what I said to him. I said, well, how many cats do you pull out of trees every day, you know?
No, it's a very specialised job, and we're very lucky because our firefighters are known throughout the world, and sometimes they're called upon or they volunteers to go to another country to help put out, particularly America,
Yes.
to put fires out, Canada, America, because they've got such expertise.
Yes. Yeah. But, you know, it's another one of those, when I was speaking to the person that was sitting next to me, we were sort of talking about the sector and just how much pressure and how many mental health problems exist in first responders, and, you know, generally first responding settings are occupied predominantly by men. And but he was telling me that the whatever the fire service is called now, I think it's an amalgamation of the MFB and CFA, but they have very, very good mental health support. He was telling me, which is great to hear. They rely a lot on peer support. So peer support is something that's really emerging strongly, or has been over many years, strongly within first responder settings, but also within other organisations around people really wanting to connect in with people that aren't mental health professionals, that are just peers who they can have a conversation with. And we're going to talk about that during the show, given that the theme here in Australia for International Men's Day yesterday is about mateship and the importance of having mates and how it really, really does impact the mental health, safety and well-being of our men.
You mentioned peer support. Listeners may not be aware of what that actually is. Could you tell us?
Yeah, sure. Well, peers are, you know, we know what peers are. Peers are kind of our equals. So in the workplace, we have different different kind of support pathways for mental health. So we have things like your EAP, which is an employee assistance program, which is generally an external provider that employees and their families can access to get free counselling. So that's one thing. And then now a lot of organisations are training their people in mental health first aid. So very similar to physical first aid, but mental health first aid is really just getting to understand signs and symptoms, how to have conversations, all that kind of stuff. And you can also be trained as a trainer in mental health first aid. So that's another address to mental health. Then there's all sorts of different programs that organisations will also adopt. But peer support programs are specific programs where people volunteer their time to actually be promoted as a peer supporter in the workplace. So just say here at 3WBC, I might elect myself to be a peer support person. So anyone at 3WBC can come and talk to me about how they're feeling, and I'll be able to hold their space for them, maintain their confidentiality, all of those things that...
So if somebody wanted to become involved in this type of thing, would they contact somebody in particular, or would they...
Well, it would come from the organisation that they're working for. So if you're employed by, you know, Deloitte, for example, I don't know why I pulled Deloitte out of my head, that just came out, and they had a peer support program, then I could volunteer for that.
Right.
But a lot of organisations have no address to mental health at all. So, you know, then I might go, I might be a bit of an advocate for mental health and maybe create that within that environment myself.
I've said it a dozen times, and I'm sure you have too, Ray, and that is Australia couldn't exist without volunteers.
We're the leading country in terms of charity, I think, aren't we?
Yes, we are, and what magnificent work they all do. And... well, you couldn't really exist without it.
No.
And you come to think of what it involves and how many people.
Oh, gosh. You know, even last night I was speaking to somebody, she's from Queensland, and she was telling me about a woman that is a parent at the school her children go to, and the kind of volunteer work that she does in raising awareness for violence against women in other countries and mutilation, genital mutilation, like really, really horrendous stuff that she raises money for and sends back to various countries just because she can. It was just like, wow, people do some really amazingly selfless things, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I have been involved in volunteer work, and I could see myself the results of this, how it can affect mental health.
How you can affect your mental health positively by being involved.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is it can affect it and also help it. Like
Yes.
both ways. Because we haven't got experts in all these fields, that we've got enough people to
That's right.
take care of roles that involve people who volunteer.
Yeah, well, I'm going to jump a bit forward, but it just seems appropriate to discuss this now about volunteering and, raising money or raising awareness. And I'm not a massive fan of just raising money and throwing money at stuff. So you look at, and no disrespect to Movember, but you look at Movember raises lots of funds for men's health during November. However, our suicide rates and our prostate cancer cases are only increasing. So it doesn't appear that all that money is actually helping. However, you were involved in something recently. Your beautifully dear departed wife, Jill, who died from stroke, you have taken upon yourself over the years to every year do a walk. And you became a bit of a television star this year. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, well, certainly the Stroke Foundation is a great love of mine, really, because my wife died of a stroke some years ago now. And when I say she died of a stroke, she had a stroke and never actually regained consciousness. And over a period of, I think it was about 5 or 6 days, just passed away, which in a way was a blessing because, of course, she never lived to suffer. But now, of course, the Stroke Foundation are a wonderful group of people whose whole idea is to raise enough money to keep the people that do all the research looking for better treatments, better medications, better everything. And I was lucky because I surprised myself. I think I did a 5.5 kilometre walk on the same time as Run Melbourne Marathon. And in that that enabled me actually to raise, I think, something like $4,000 towards the Stroke Foundation and the work that they do. They have now a stroke ambulance, and the idea of the stroke ambulance is that you get the patient having a stroke as much quicker. Normally it was rushing an ambulance. Now everything's in the ambulance. So when you pick up the patient, you start work, the doctors start work straight away on you. They can pick out what sort of a stroke it is and save lives. And they are saving lives, which is wonderful.
Wow, and that's a direct, like, it's a really tangible outcome from money, isn't it? To be able to have something like that. Here's a question for you. Why is it called stroke?
Sorry, what was the question?
Why is it called stroke?
Oh, you didn't tell me you were going to ask me that.
It just came into my head. I thought, why do we call it a stroke? It must mean something.
I don't know.
Well, if anyone can, Google that for me and text me, let me know what stroke means. We would love to know.
I don't know, because normally it's really got nothing to do with the actual disease. It's more I don't know. I can't answer that question.
Yeah, let's don't pretend to be medical
let's hope
professionals.
somebody can tell us.
Yep, somebody will. Now, I do have a special mention for a man who's texted in. His name's David Willett, and we gave David a shout out in the last show as well. But David works for a wonderful social enterprise called Ability Works, and Ability Works employ probably up to 200 mentally and physically disabled and socially disadvantaged people. And I'm sure David won't mind me disclosing David lives with, very, very acute anxiety and a bit of a touch of autism as well. But, David's a wonderful man who tries every day to manage with what he lives with. And, he's very impressive in the way he does that. But he's texted me to say this. So I'm just going to read it out. Rae, please mention David Willett of Doncaster East and about how I felt about Carlton Blues and their 2022 season, if you could, Rae. Thank you. I'm listening right now. So I think David's deeply disappointed with the Blues. And he also barracks for Hawthorn at the same time. So, David, I hope you're having a wonderful day. I will not be in at Ability Works tomorrow, but I will probably see you on Friday there. So there you go. Shout out to David Willett.
Very good.
Can you say hello to David as well, Ken? You say hello to David.
What am I doing?
Can you say hi to David Willett?
Oh, of course I can, David. It's a pleasure having you on the program. I think if you get on Rae's program, you become famous. She told me that.
If I got David Willett on the show, it would be a 4-hour show, I'm pretty sure. But,
good.
But very interesting to boot. So we're going to go to our first break, Ken. Can you believe it? We're already half an hour into the show. Now, I've chosen a few songs today for various reasons. And the first one is one that I just want to dedicate to you. And it's a 1977 hit by an American-Australian vocalist. She was born in about 1953, I think. She was a TV personality as well as a vocalist as well. Do you know who I'm talking about?
And it wouldn't be John Farnham.
Well, given it's a female, probably not. Yep.
It wouldn't be... No, look, I don't know.
Do you want me to give you the initials? I'll give you some clues. Her first name begins with M and her second name is H. And she's got a daughter called Denny.
No, I don't.
Okay, it's Marsha Hines.
What's her name?
Marsha Hines.
Oh, Marsha.
Marsha Hines. And the song is You.
Yes.
For you. Okay.
Oh, thank you. And what's the song?
You. The song is You. That's the name of the song.
Oh, that's the name of the song.
Yeah, so you got to listen to the words, and I'm dedicating that to you, Ken Lyons.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah.
That's lovely. And she's a lovely artist.
Oh, she is. She's done amazing work. She really has. So without further ado, here's Marsha Hines and You. We will be right back after the break. You're listening to 94.1 FM 3.
It's Nigel Loveday here. You're invited to join me every Monday from 2 to 4 p.m. for Easy Listening with Nigel Loveday. Yes, that's right, easy listening hits and memories from the soundtrack of our lives. Join me every Monday from 2 to 4 p.m. for good company and, importantly, great music. Easy Listening with Nigel Loveday, that's right, it's here on 94.1 3WBC, the voice of the Inner East.
There you go. Welcome back. The time is just 34 minutes past 10 and you're listening to 94.1 FM 3WBC with Rae Bonney and life legend Ken Lyons. How are you feeling now, Ken?
Lovely to be back with you.
It is, isn't it? It's great. Did you like that song?
Yes, I did. But then again, it wasn't my fullest attention.
No, because we were chit-chatting as well, weren't we?
We did, didn't
we?
we?
Did. And then Gabby came in.
Yeah.
Gabby, our amazing program director here at 3WBC, does incredible work. Gabby believes that coming to 3WBC actually saved her life. Because because Gabby had experienced the loss of her beautiful husband, and was, rightfully feeling probably similar to how you feel about losing Jill, Ken.
Yes, really, we're very, very lucky to have somebody like Gabby here to guide us.
Yes, and she does it, and also she volunteers her time as well. In fact, I think I'm the only person that gets paid a lot of money to present here at 3WBC, Ken. He wasn't listening. Ken decided to have a read of his notes.
Yeah, I was reading something.
No, I was just saying that I think I'm the only person at 3WBC that gets paid a lot of money as a presenter.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. That's jokes, everybody. Anyway, as promised to the audience, Ken, I'm going to rewind us back to the 26th of November in 1924. What happened on that day?
In 1934?
24.
Oh, 24. I was born on that particular
$100
day.
to Ken for getting that right.
Thank you very much. This is Monopoly money you're giving me.
Now, you were born here in Melbourne.
I was.
And I'm going to hand...
Can I just interrupt you there? Because on my birth certificate, it simply says Paran, which is a suburb of Melbourne. Not where, what hospital or home or whatever, but just Paran, which could have meant that I could have been born up a lane somewhere.
That's what I was going to say. I could just see you coming out in a gutter somewhere,
Behind the pub, anywhere I could have been born in Paran.
Yes. Well, that's
so therefore, I'll never know where I was actually.
You never asked your mum or your dad?
Well, it's a bit late now.
Unless we get out the Ouija board.
Isn't it funny? There's questions you could ask your mother or a member of the family that has since gone who used to be able to tell you anything about the early days of the family, and they've all gone. So do it now, listeners. If there's something you want to know about somebody in the early part of your family, then ask them now while they're alive. Otherwise, you'll spend the rest of your life trying to find out.
Well, that's right. Or just guessing, or trying to. I heard on the radio the other day this really beautiful story. It was on a competitive radio station, but a woman had phoned in about she'd won a competition, and she just somehow mentioned she'd just reconnected or connected with her sister, and her sister was adopted. She's older than her, and she was adopted. And this other woman had registered with that My DNA, that DNA thing that you can sign up for. And long story short, these sisters found each other and they look exactly the same.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And it was, the story is a lot more complicated than I'm saying, but it was, this woman was so emotional about, now having this sister in her life, after 50 odd years. And just really nice story. So so you never know if you were born in a gutter or, potentially got some.
I don't know that.
You might have some other siblings floating around. Actually, you and I look a bit alike, don't we? Could it be?
It couldn't have been. Okay, tell us more about this man.
Do you think you could be my? Could you be my dad?
He had an interesting life. He did.
Yeah, could you be my dad? Could that be possible? Yeah.
Well, tell us more.
Anyway, that I'm jesting. So you were telling me before the show, and I didn't know this about you, but you moved around a lot as a kid, as a young boy. And you said that made you feel really, really insecure.
What did I do?
You moved around a lot. Your parents moved house.
Oh, moving house?
Yes.
Yes. Well, my mother, I think she was part gypsy because she moved all the time to different places, and my father just sort of went along. He was a very what's the word?
Chilled?
I think he enjoyed doing it, but at the same time he never objected to it. So we all had to just sort of pack up and move.
So your mum just got sick of the garden or something, I just want a new one?
She walked around the neighbourhood looking at houses and gardens and things, and if she saw something, that's nice, and that's a really nice house, and it's better than the one we're in, let's move. And of course, in those days, they used to have a big board in the front with for lease, or as it was in those days, to let. The words to let.
Like toilet.
To let to somebody. And my mother was the one, she'd come home and say, I found something better. Everyone pack up. and we'd move. And I'm not sure how many houses I lived in.
You have to pack up that crystal set every time, Ken?
Well, I reckon I moved in about 4 or 5 houses. And once my cousin, who lived in Paris, came out to visit, and she had a daughter who was about the same age as me, and so we were both around about 12, and we decided, she was a bit of a villain, Pamela, and Pam and I discovered that we were going to bury a treasure. So we went round the house and ratted anything we could find that looked valuable and put it in a tin, and we buried it in the place next door, which was a vacant block. We thought, safe enough, we can dig it up one day when it's, when we're a bit older.
About 98.
In the meantime, she told everybody that, or everyone was saying, what happened to our brooch, or what happened to our ring, or something? And
My wedding ring, your mum's wedding ring.
We'd be very quiet, and we wouldn't say anything. And then all of a sudden, the place next door started to get built on, and they put the foundations in, and we lost a lot in 1 hit. Nobody knew about that except the two of us.
Pam. Where's Pam these days? In prison, probably.
Well, we didn't. Now that we've lost all those things, we didn't say anything. So it was very naughty.
There you go.
But the memory's still there, and of course that tin would have, disintegrated over time, and all those beautiful things would have been wasted. And
you never know, though. Tin was probably had more tin in it than it does these days. So
we talked about that as adults once. We actually met up in Paris.
You and Pam?
Was there at that stage.
You and Pam?
Yeah.
Met in Paris?
In Paris.
She doesn't sound like she doesn't sound like the Paris kind of girl, really.
Yeah, well, I was working in England at the time, and Paris is not that far away. So, just crossed the channel, really. So they were part of moving houses, and that's what I think. We didn't only move houses, where I actually in my lifetime moved businesses as well. And I think this didn't have a good effect on me over a period of time. That's why I mentioned it, to do with mental health, because I found sometimes very upsetting to have to move, sometimes to a different area, which meant I had to change schools. So I went to a variety of schools, 3 or 4, I think, and including a kindergarten. So
how did you go making friends, like mates? We're talking about the importance of mateship today.
Yes, that's why I mentioned it, really. As far as school was concerned, sure, you do lose friends.
Yeah.
For no other reason but you move away from the area, so you just don't see them. That's one thing. The other thing, of course, is to have mates on a more serious level for when you're an adult, and it may be through work, so when you get a job, or if you have an opportunity of travel and things. So I was constant. I've lived in so many countries and so many places, and I don't think it's a healthy thing to do. And I think it's circumstances. Firstly, of course, you're in charge. Your parents are in charge of you. Therefore, you have to move with them. if you are of that age group. And then, of course, then you've got other things, work. Then there's, of course, a war in
Yep.
between times. So if you're involved in the war, therefore you're sent here, there, and everywhere. You come out, you may do education further, perhaps go to university or something, another move again. There's lots of moves in my life, and when I look back now, and I think I really craved to stay in one place. I just wanted so much. The one that we lived in Mont Albert, which is a suburb of Melbourne, I loved it because all the family suddenly all moved in together. So I had grandparents, aunts, cousins, all moved in.
Into the one house.
In the one house, yeah.
Wow.
So I was at my happiest.
Yes.
Really, I loved it.
Well,
Everybody.
today you have a gigantic family. Your family, I've been to some of your family events. It's,
Yes.
it's
Well,
like,
there again, yes, more moves.
you have to book out venues just to house your family.
That's it. I should walk around the streets and look for a house. These things can have a bad effect. They have a good effect in some respects, but also a sort of changing all the time. You feel floating,
Yep.
and I don't think that's a healthy thing.
Yeah. We were also talking about, you were, thank you so much for how you've served our country as well you mentioned the war before, and we were talking about that also before in your experience, and you talked about the mateship.
Mateship is so in a war,
Yes.
where you're with a group of people, and your life is threatening.
How old were you when you went off?
I joined at 18.
18, yeah.
Yeah, and I did 4.5 years in the Air Force. So, I mean, that was... you become your friends become more than just friends. You're in a life-threatening situation, and therefore it's so important to have somebody to talk to, especially if you're going through a difficult time. So I had, I think, three friends who are... Unfortunately, I'm the last one left because all the others are gone to God, and so we still see each other. We see each other on Anzac Day, and we talk. We win the war all over again because it was us that won it for them.
Of course.
They don't realise it, but that's a fact. I mean, it's so good to be able to say, "Remember when."
Yeah.
And
you told me a story recently that I really loved because Rory and I had gone to see Motor Classica at the exhibition buildings here in Melbourne. And you told me a story about that you used to actually sleep in the exhibition buildings when you were doing training.
yes,
And you'd sleep on these funny little beds that...
the cyclone beds.
Yeah, you tell me that story because I love it. This is about mateship, by the way.
Yeah, well, we were living in the exhibition buildings in Melbourne, which are beautiful, beautiful buildings, and because the Air Force had taken over, and it's an area where we lived while we were doing basic training, and we used to have these cyclone beds which undid, if I can, I don't know, best describe them as the legs would open out, and they were most uncomfortable things. Well, what happened was, you realised what happened once you knew what the noise was all about.
Well, because you used to have to put a metal pin in.
A matchstick.
Well, for listeners, how you kept them upright was putting a metal pin in to keep the legs splayed. But
that's it.
But the metal pin often got replaced with
with a match.
A matchstick.
Something
Yes.
just to hold it together,
Yep.
so that when you came in late and the lights were out, you would be so tired, you'd be so happy that, you know, how you jump on a bed and lay down and relax. Well, if you were new and you didn't know this, you'd do that. You jump on the bed to relax, and all of a sudden the whole thing would collapse, and there'd be this noise of cyclone beds dropping all over the place. And then you'd realise what's been going on. So you'd examine very carefully before you jumped on the bed.
Yeah. So it's after those 4 years and you came back, and that's when you became a pharmacist? After the war?
Oh, after the war, yes. We
Yep.
had the opportunity through the, what do they call it, the government scheme. It was a government scheme to give you an opportunity of getting back into civilization again, and you would apply for a course. You could do any course. You could do medicine if you wanted to, which I would have loved to have done, but it was, I think, 6 or 7 years, and I'd left school 4 years before that, so I thought, no. So I did pharmacy, and that was something I loved to do anyway. I was quite happy about that because I used to do chemical experiments in the garage at home. And
gosh.
how I never blew it up, I don't know. Somebody gave me a chemistry set, and that's what started me off.
Now, actually, can I just pause you there for a moment? And again, I'm not, being gendered here, but, I am the mother of 2 boys who cannot keep their hands off stuff that it makes fire, makes noise, makes explosion. Is that biologically a boy thing?
Since you put it that way, yes. Must have been something in my makeup, I think, that caused all those things to happen. But that was a wonderful getting back, and we made lifelong friends too in our work in pharmacy. And quite a few of them are still around, but not so many now. But
during this time was when you met Jill and started making a family too.
Celebrate.
No, you started making a family with Jill.
Oh yes, well we
Yes.
had 4 children.
Yes.
Which was lucky, and 2 boys and 2 girls. Boy, girl, girl, boy, in that order. And they're all adults, and I'm a grandfather, 9 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. So when we all get together at Christmas time, we got too many. We can't fit into one house.
That's right.
So we go to a park now. We go to a park, and we have a great day with the kids, the littlies, the big ones, and everything. And there's and dogs and everything else.
Yeah.
And it's just a wonderful opportunity of getting together.
Oh, I remember one of the first lunches you and I had together, and you love telling a story, and I love listening. And you told me the story of when you had the pharmacies, and long story short, you were offered to sell the pharmacies, and it kind of happened like this. You just went home to Jill to say, selling the pharmacies and we're going to England.
I didn't mention Jill, did I? We did have a wife.
We have mentioned Jill. We have mentioned Jill today.
I did have somebody that had all the children for me.
Yes, but it was very sudden, and then you just jumped on a boat and off you went to England.
We did. I just went home one night and I said, start packing, we're going to England.
Yeah, and all 4 kids, and off you went.
That was really us. And when I look back now, and I'm thinking, this is one that I beat my mother because she would only go move to a horse.
That's right. This is the man who loves security and stability and, likes to keep his roots in one place. Pardon the pun. But
this was one city, one country to another.
Yeah, but, when you got there, you were not feeling great mentally either, were you?
When I got where?
To England.
To England.
You had some very dark time.
We had a bit of a problem there. The problem was mine. The problem was to do with my family, in particular my wife and I. So we had a mental problem there as well, I suppose you could call it, through a mental situation. Not that we were crazy. But then again,
I think you were a little bit.
I
It
think,
sounds
looking
like it.
back, yes.
Yeah.
Anyway, we overcame that in time. So it's something personal, therefore it's I can't sort of discuss it fully, but I went through life with all sorts of, strange reactions to various things, and I look back now and I think I never needed, or I never felt that I needed expert help until really I reached a stage now where I think I probably do. With various things that have happened to me through time, through the fact that I have quite a big family altogether now. So there's all sorts of things that, and this is where mateship's so important. I've got people I can ring up, friends, that I can ring up and say, I've got a problem. What'll I do? Give me some advice. But it's a different grade of mateship, of being more fully involved with somebody to help you through a difficult situation. I think mateship, the strongest mateship I ever had, of course, was my time in the Air Force, where death is involved, where difficulties but apart from that, therefore those mates have still, those that are still alive, and there's not many. In fact, I'm the only one in Victoria that's still alive. This is so important, even with one. You've got somebody you can compare situations with. So I'm very fond or keen on friendship and mateship, as we call it today, and I think it's very helpful to. I said to somebody once, one of my friends, I said, "What'll I do in a case like that? I can't see my way out of it," and he said, "Get a dog."
A dog.
Get a dog. And he did. Oh. And he's been much better since he got a dog.
There you go. And dogs are medicine, aren't they? They're real medicine.
Well, now there's a case of my mother-in-law was in a nursing home, and we had a dog, a big dog. It wasn't me, but it was one of the family had this big dog. My son, actually, my eldest son. It was a Great Dane.
Oh, that's enormous.
So we took it to the nursing home, and, the effect that had, and you probably had this story with other people.
Yes.
The effect that had on the people living in the nursing home was amazingly, and it was so helpful. They loved that dog. We had to bring it in on numerous occasions, and so that was one treatment, I think, that only needed an animal.
Yep. Well, my dog Vincent actually was recipient of one of your dog's dog houses. You gave me.
Oh, right.
Yeah, kennel. Yeah.
So that's dog kennel.
He loves it. Drags it all over the backyard, but Vincent, he's a therapy dog, so he sits in therapy with my clients. He knows what to do with each one of them, and some of them he sits on, and the others he'll sit in the beanbag and just observe. But
so it is good, isn't it, to know that something like that, as simple as a pet.
That's right. So mateship. Quite often here in Australia especially, we might think that a mate is a bloke or a man, but a mate can be anything. A mate can be your dog, a female, can be anything that represents that comfort and that place you go when, as you said, Ken, when you just need somebody to help you make sense of things.
Well, I think a lot of them treat an animal like a baby, like in the case of the nursing home, it was being treating the animal like it was one of their children.
That's right.
And for that reason, it did wonders.
Yep, absolutely. Don't just rush out and get a dog, by the way, because dogs are like children, or all animals are like children. The responsibility is huge. It's not like if it doesn't work out, you just hand them back or don't take care of them. It is a big responsibility. Speaking of responsibility, Ken, we're an hour into the show. It's time for another break. And in my research, I was thinking, wonder what music was popular in 1924. So I looked up the top hits of November 1924. So I came up with George Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue.
Oh, beautiful song.
Well, it goes on for 17 bloody minutes, so I certainly wasn't playing that on the show. Isham Jones, It Had to Be You.
Mm-hmm.
And Al Jolson, California, Here I Come. They were the top 3 hits. And I played them, I went, they don't sound like hits. They sounded like your crystal radio, all the crackling and,
with the static.
It's static. So I didn't think it was, 3WBC 2022 material. But the next song I'm going to play, it's a song by a band called The Cure. Have you heard of The Cure?
Which one's that?
Well, it's a story. It's not a story. It's a song I'm going to play. But the reason I'm playing this is recently I was on a road show through Australia and New Zealand talking to men about their health and their mental health within the civil infrastructure sector. So going out pretty much into the bush, talking about men. And there was this particular event I was at, and there was a woman there, and she told me a story that had just happened the week before. She's got a 5-year-old son who was in care, like in educational care. Anyway, he got upset and started to cry. Anyway, fast forward, she was with him on a weekend and she was punishing him for something, but he wouldn't cry. He just blinked at her. He just kept on blinking. And she said, "Why are you blinking at me?" And the little boy told her that his teacher had told him when he started to cry to stop crying and blink so the tears wouldn't come out, so that would stop him from crying.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's horrible. That is just...
Certainly, it is, but why would she think that?
It's horrible. You know, if we're going to make any change in the world, we have to change these attitudes that boys have emotions as well, just like everyone does. And, to express them is not a sign of weakness. So that's what this teacher was telling this little boy. It's weak to cry, blink your tears away, she said. And so it made me think of this song by The Cure. It's actually called Boys Don't Cry. So when we come back, we're going to talk a little bit more about this theme for this year's International Men's Day that came out of the Australian Men's Health Forum. And the Australian Men's Health Forum, we're the peak body for men's health here in Australia. I'm very proud to have been the first woman on the board there, and I'm also now the Vice President. So, we do a lot with very, very little at the Australian Men's Health Forum. And anyone who follows me on social media and sees all the wonderful resources that I share, that's us at the Australian Men's Health Forum. We have a very small administration and led by Glenn Poole. He's an amazing man from the UK as well, and he's always been very, very concerned about male suicide. So the work that he's done is amazing. So grateful to have him. So that's where we're at. So when we come back, we're going to talk a bit more about that. How does that sound, Ken? How does that sound? Good?
Very good.
I'm still talking to you.
Very. Yes.
Ken's just getting completely bored with my blah, 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 blah. Here she goes again.
All. No, I've been absorbing every word.
Ray's ranting. Even when I was at this wedding last night, I find myself, my voice gets louder. It's like, do you know? Anyway, here we go. You're listening to 94.1 FM. It's 3WBC. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. The time is 7 minutes past 11. 7:11 or 11:07. You're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC with Rae Bonney and Ken Lyons. OAM Air Force veteran, pharmacist, and all-round entertainer. So we were talking about your OAM before, your Order of Australia. I can't remember when you got it, but tell us why you were awarded such a prestigious recognition.
Yes, well, after the war was over, of course, we had a lot of veterans who had left school and...
Pop your headphones on, Ken. There we go. he'd forget his head if it wasn't screwed on, honestly.
Oh, there's no mirror here. How can I tell?
There you go, can hear now.
Okay. Yeah, after the war was over, there were so many veterans, of course, who left school virtually to join the services and came back to nothing because where do they go? What do they do? Where can they get if they get a pension or they get paid out? Like I got paid out, and I got this princely sum of £175. That was my payout, and of which I bought a car, and it was a 1932 Triumph Sports.
Whoa!
Car.
What colour was it?
And
was it red?
That only got me into a lot of trouble.
Was it red, Ken? Was it red?
Was it
red? What
red? No, it wasn't red. No,
what
bad enough that I had the car, I think, but that was a big draw card. Therefore, big draw card for girlfriends. You've got a car when you're a student, you know, like that's good. You must be worth a lot of money. So, of course, it was called Theophrastus. It had that name because that was a connection with pharmacy in the Greek system, and so anyway, but it finished up an absolute wreck. I had rubber tubing holding the door together, in the driver's side door, so that when the car pulled up, the door went out and came back in again. It was so bad. Anyway, that was my car, and what were we talking about? We were talking about...
Well, we are going to be talking about...
what I was doing to get the OAM.
Yes.
That's right. So that was one thing. The other thing was... No, not the car.
The car had nothing to do with it. Scratch that.
I got it from helping the families of veterans who virtually had nothing to start themselves off with. So we had to find them accommodation firstly and jobs and things like that. And that was my job to do. And then the other thing was, that was one thing.
I think you work in pharmacy as well.
Well, certainly pharmacy, but that wasn't why I got the... I think, yes, it was a series of volunteer situations. I had about 4 or 5 that I looked after in Rotary and things like that. So that all went together and somebody nominated me, and I had the thrill of getting that wonderful award, which I had to go to Government House in Melbourne to a function, that afternoon tea it was, a garden party, and get the medal presented. So, you know, it was all very exciting because you get a letter indicating that you would be considered for an award, and but not to mention anything to anybody about it. And then eventually, of course, you get another letter to tell you your application, or the thing was that the next thing was you're now down to a smaller number of people, and therefore it looks as if you might be getting it. And then finally, congratulations from the Governor General that you have received the Order of Australia. So it came over a period of probably a couple of months.
Yeah.
And the build-up for it. And then on the day you get the medal, you also get a few other little things thrown in as well. You get an album and some beautiful stuff, really. I've got at home. So that's when you get it, and that's the excitement. And some very famous people turn up on the day that you get that presentation day, and you say, "Oh yeah, he's famous. I know him. He's on television."
Well, that's that's what they're saying about you.
Well, they probably is.
There's Ken Lyons. Oh my God! But must have been such an incredibly
Well, I
proud
certainly knew
moment.
a lot of them. Yeah. And,
But I remember going to an OAM event with you years ago at Applewood, up the road. I think pre-COVID, you get together every year with your OAM crowd, and that was really
yeah,
good.
I got a few. I got one. I've got a few things like Honourable Citizen Award and Achievement Award and all those things.
Yeah.
Hanging on the wall now in my
Yes.
in my where I live.
You've got a lot of stuff hanging off your wall, haven't you? But going back to what we were talking about before the break, and that is, commemorating 2022 International Men's Day, and Gabby popped her head in again just to say goodbye and thanks for the shout out. But she's having you back on her show this coming Thursday. Is that correct?
Well, yes, they're interesting. I was asked to come on their program.
Yeah.
And the idea is they ask me usually 2 or 3 questions. And the reason they ask me those questions is because of my age. At 98, they think I've been around long enough to know
Well,
the good,
surprised
the
you
bad,
can
and the
remember
ugly.
2 or 3 questions.
And there's some very interesting questions they come up with, and usually I only get a very short notice about them, so I haven't got the time to, to look up references and
Do your
things.
research. Like no one's texted me about what stroke means either yet. So please, anyone that's out there, Google up what does stroke mean? Where does the name stroke come from? But Gabby came in and said that this week you're going to be talking about your time on this show. So that's going to be pretty easy for you because it'll be all fresh in your mind. But, this celebration of mateship that we've been talking about through the program, I guess we came up with that because it's an aim to inspire men to make time for mates. And I know that during the lead up to International Men's Day, and I've been doing a lot of social media, a lot of messaging, the amount of men that have been checking in with their mates has been overwhelming. And I actually spoke to somebody the other day. He'd not contacted one of his mates for 10 years, and used this platform to go, I'm going to give him a call. And he did, and it just so happened that this friend was not travelling very well and really needed that call. So this stuff does work, really does, these campaigns and these reminders of how important it is to really follow and take seriously, because we know that research shows that men with good mates live longer, they have better health, and they're less likely to have suicidal thoughts as well. We know that. So it's men literally having each other's back. It's beautiful.
Well, you need good health to enjoy life. There's no doubt about that. And I had a few suggestions. And one of the main things, in my opinion, is we should get a full medical check with your local doctor for something that will go from your head to the toes. Check you right out. With
So you have to take all your clothes off?
Pardon?
You'd have to take all your clothes off then?
The idea being that if there's anything wrong, that's when they're going to find out. There's no good leaving it. A lot of men, I can't ask why, but a lot of men don't go to the doctor because they're a bit scared. They don't want to know that something that's troubling them needs attention.
Or is that because boys aren't raised to actually pay that amount of attention to themselves or feel like they have permission to actually do that kind of stuff? You look at, even Australian culture that, boys, you look at boys in sport, the more injured you are, the more of a hero you are. So boys aren't shown how to care for themselves. It's not that males instinctively and biologically don't care for themselves. They're just not shown.
That's right, they don't.
No, so we can't expect, and there are so many of our services here, particularly our mental health services, are not designed for men. They're very female-centric. So men don't feel very comfortable because these services don't preserve dignity and pride and masculinity. So a lot of services for men are male shaming services like anger management, and men have to be better.
Right. That's not good news, is it?
No.
No, that's good. Well, having had that checkup and having found that you're either okay or there's one or two things that need attention, then there's a few things you can do is to take up a hobby of some sort, no matter what. It doesn't involve too many things.
Well, how many hobbies have you had over your life? You have at least 100 at a time, don't you?
Yes, about that, I think. And start writing a book.
Yes.
That's what I've done.
How is that book going?
That's a good thing to do because it also takes up a fair bit of time, but then while you're writing that book, all those memories are coming back to you and you're reliving them again.
Yep.
And this is wonderful. You go through you go through the tears, you go through the laughter and everything, and you remember those things as if they happened yesterday. And if they don't, well, you've got a problem with your memory. So you go and talk to people and things help to come back to you then. And then you might still be able to do radio because it's a good thing.
Yeah.
And there's the community radio stations would be very interested. Don't forget that you don't have to be fully trained to go along and tell them that you're interested, because there's a lot of jobs in radio apart from sitting in front of the mic. And so that would be as another suggestion. Go and have a look at the local radio station, go and have a chat to them, make an appointment, go and have a chat, and there might be a spot for you. And you might be able to be trained into becoming a radio presenter. So they're things to have a look at. Ring up old friends. I've been doing that lately. Ring up old friends on the phone. You haven't spoken to them for ages. They think, how are you? They love it. They come on and say, oh, it's so good to hear from you, and then you might make arrangements to go and have a coffee together or something like that. And walking. Wonderful way of keeping well. Walk around the block, have a look at the neighbours' gardens and things.
Or look through their bedroom window or something, you think?
Yes, do it. I mean, because walking, everyone, if you can walk, you can move around. And what about taking a course of some sort? I notice that now, I don't expect many of you would want to do that, but you can do a course, a university course, and become a qualified person if you and free, by the way. You can do any of the courses at university, and you can pick your own university.
Well, what about the U3A, the University of the Third Age? I mean,
absolutely.
That's amazing.
Free too.
Yep.
And I mentioned earlier, get a dog.
Or don't get a dog if you're not going to take responsibility for it.
That's right, of course not. No. And I think this is important. One more thing, and that is that if you're on medication, or if you're suffering from something and you need medication and everything, your pharmacist. Speak to your pharmacist. Now, pharmacists today are very thoroughly trained and will help you.
Are you
free.
suggesting that you weren't thoroughly trained? You sort of said these days they're thoroughly trained.
Say again?
You said these days pharmacists are thoroughly trained, and I said, are you suggesting that you weren't?
They weren't.
That you weren't?
Well, that's an interesting question because in actual fact, at the course that I did, going back to just after the war finished, so that was that era, we learnt a totally different course. We learnt more botanical things like that, and herbs and herbalists.
Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with that at all.
And they were it all was very good. I mean, that was based on actual results and things like that. Today, of course, there are different pharmacists being turned out today, and so if you've just got a little time to spare, go along and speak to your pharmacist. Ask him some questions about the medication that you're on. Ask him his opinion on, the various treatments that you're having, and you'll find, and he will be able to, if you wish,
or she, or she,
yeah,
he or she,
and so you can get him to print some stuff out for you,
or
if you
her,
like,
even,
because they can do that, and this is something you may not realise, that they can visit you in your home. You can come out and have a session with you at home, with yourself and a family member perhaps. So all these things are available, but you don't hear about them.
No, I think that's a really good point, Ken, and I love that you've sort of listed these options out for people because, as you said, oftentimes we don't think that these things are available.
True.
But that point of having a family member or a friend with you, I think is excellent because sometimes we forget to ask things or we don't feel confident. We don't know how to ask. We feel a bit embarrassed. So to have somebody there to remember what's being said as well is top-notch advice.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's a good idea too. You mentioned it, and that is if you're going to visit a pharmacist and you'd like to have a chat with him personally or her, do so, but make an appointment. Ring through and say you'd like to speak to them.
It's just manners too.
Otherwise, you get them in the pharmacy and they get called away and all that sort of thing. So use your pharmacist for information, and you'll find that can be a big help.
Great advice. Now, I have some information that we've been wanting to hear all show long. So, long-time listener, one of my best friends ever in the world, Jenny Thorpe. Now, Jenny Thorpe in herself is an amazing woman. We've known each other for much longer than you and I've known each other. I would hate to. It's more than, it's probably about 30 years I've known Jenny. Anyway, Jenny introduced me to volunteer work years and years ago through My Room, which is for kids' cancer. And it's a very, very well-known charity, and they have a ball every year. And Jenny's been volunteering for probably the whole entire time that it's been operating, with another amazing woman called Mary McGowan, who did a lot of work with the Royal Children's Hospital, and probably still does actually. But, Jenny even went as far as one time did a whole career change. And I don't know if you've heard of Ronald McDonald House. It's a place where families can go when their children are in hospital at the Royal Children's and they need to be close to them but don't have the resources or funds to support, more accommodations. So Jenny actually managed that whole space for a period of time, and just because she just really wanted to know what it was like. And so Jenny does great work, and she's done great work again this morning because she's actually going to tell us what stroke means. So the word stroke, Jenny says, is related to the Greek word apoplexia. Do you know what that means?
No.
Okay. Which implies being struck down with a deadly blow. The dictionary meaning of apoplexy is unconsciousness or incapacity resulting from a cerebral hemorrhage or stroke.
That
there
is
you go.
Very interesting.
So thank you, Jenny.
Thank you for that. That's
very interesting piece of information. So now we've uncovered that. We know that connecting in with support is really important. In fact, it's probably a good time for me to mention that, during the show, we talk about all kinds of different things, and sometimes people can feel affected by some of the themes or some of the stories that we tell. So if you are feeling a little bit uncomfortable and want some support and you don't know where to go, try Lifeline. That number is 131114. You don't have to be in crisis to speak to somebody at Lifeline. Suicide callback service, that can be about yourself or somebody that you're worried about. That number is 1300 659 467. And emergency services, 000, you'll be directed to the right spot. So again, you don't have to be in crisis to reach out for help, but it's important that we do.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there is another organisation that's run by volunteers, and that's the Poisons Advice Bureau. And I haven't got their number here, unfortunately. But
Jenny, can you Google the Poisons Advice Bureau?
People get bitten by a spider or something like that. They don't know what to do. They're in pain. You ring up. It's run by pharmacists, so they're all trained. And no matter what, whether it's a bite of some sort or maybe a sudden, you've had a fall and you're not sure exactly what you got, but you've got the symptoms there, so they'll tell you what to do.
Well, that's right, because sometimes our physical health, if we don't attend to it, it can turn into a mental health problem as well. So it's important that we're addressing both of those. Now, before we go to the next break, I just wanted to give a bit of a shout out. Last night I mentioned I was at the beautiful wedding of Gary and Jade out at the Stones in the Yarra Valley, and what an amazing venue that is. The staff were second to none, amazing. However, when we got to the reception area and the MC introduced himself, I recognised him as a man by the name of Bobby Fox. And I'd met Bobby about 4 years ago through the work that I was doing with Entertainment Assist, which is the mental health charity that supports the Australian entertainment industry. And Bobby is an Irish-born Australian actor who originated the role of Frankie Valli in the Australian production of Jersey Boys, which he performed over 850 times. Can you believe? Anyway, so Bobby comes over, goes, "Rae, oh my God, it's so good to see you." And he said, "I was going to ring you the other day," because he follows all of my stuff. And he said, Rob Mills. Now, any of you who don't know who Rob Mills was, I think he was a runner-up in Australian Idol many, many years ago, and then went on to do a lot of work in acting, and he's quite a media personality as well. That's right. He was 2003 in Australian Idol, and then so he's done a lot of TV, film, stage, musicals, like pretty much everything. But Rob has recently, Bobby told me Rob has recently written a book, which is about what's going on behind the bravado of the average Aussie bloke. So following the untimely deaths of two of Rob's friends, he began questioning who he is as a man. And soon his self-reflection shifted outwards, and he got to wondering how he fits into the category of Aussie bloke, and who is the average Aussie bloke anyway, and does he still exist? I think I'm sitting in front of one right now. But anyway, so hopefully Rob's going to come on the show at some stage and talk about this book. What do you think of that, Ken?
I think that's wonderful.
You know Rob, don't you? Or you're aware of Rob?
Both.
Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. But you never know who you're going to run into at a wedding, do you?
No, it makes life interesting.
Oh, for anyone that's listening in, thank you, Jenny, again. Poisons Information Centre, 131126. There you go. Thank you.
Good. Thank you very much for those who've taken the trouble to phone in.
Yeah, I know. Now, Ken, in our final segment, because we're coming up to the final half hour, want to know a little bit more about some of your recent accomplishments, which involve mateship, togetherness, connection, all of that stuff. We've seen you on the telly a lot. So many friends of mine, when you're on, I think you're on all the news outlets, ring me going, it's Ken.
A star overnight.
And they call you Ray's Ken. Ray's Ken's on the telly. Yeah. Anyway, so the next song I have queued is also in the theme of men, and it's by the late and very great Big O. Do you know who Big O is?
Do I?
Yeah.
Oh.
Do you think? I think you should. Big O is Roy Orbison. Surely you've heard of Roy Orbison.
Roy Orbison went into a motor place once when he was here in Melbourne and wanted to buy a car there. And they said, how, you know, they knew it was Roy Orbison. They'd been told that he was coming in. And he said, you know, as if the car was, you know, whatever he had in his pocket would pay for it, sort of thing. You know, here you are, I'll give you the money. And he said, "But cash?" And he didn't understand what the cash was. So they thought, this fellow can't be really Roy Orbison at all. So they never sold him a car until they found out later he was Roy Orbison.
Oh, how did you come across that
and they
story?
thought he was it's a story that they tell a lot, but it's in the car industry.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah.
Well, this song is in the theme of men, as I said, and it's called Workin' for the Man, not Working, because he obviously couldn't spell either. Workin' for the Man, and Wikipedia tells me that Working for the Man was inspired by Orbison's time after school, and he said he was working for El Paso Natural Gas in the daytime, cutting up steel and loading it onto trucks and chopping weeds and painting water towers. And his boss, Mr. Rose, wouldn't cut him any slack at all. And he said, you know, he worked in the blazing heat, hard labour, and then he'd play music at night, come home, and some nights he'd be too tired to eat or even undress. That's Roy Orbison. So that's the origins of this song, Working for the Man. So when we come back, we're going to talk about some of these little things that you've been up to in the last week, Ken. It's been
my goodness.
It's been a big week for you, hasn't it?
Yes.
It's been a really big week. I'm surprised that
It's
you've
been a very busy week.
All
But
right.
that's wonderful. Keep busy, everybody
busy.
listening in. Keep as busy as you can, because that helps stop getting any problems with your brain.
Yes.
Helps.
Good. All right. Well, don't go away, folks. We'll be right back after this, and you're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC. Time is 38 minutes past 11, and you're listening to 94.1 FM, 3WBC with Rae Bonney and Ken Lyons. Now, Ken, how would you describe yourself if you were introducing you? Who are you?
Complex.
Ken Lyons, a very complex man.
Well, I think probably because I have so many various interests, so I don't sort of specialise in a particular one. So
What about man?
if you're interested, then I'd love to meet you. I think being in so many things in your life, you've got some idea of what it's like to do various things that you would not normally think of doing. There's a lovely little quote, if I can say it, by a poet, an American actually, Ralph Waldo Emerson. Those of you who read poetry and stories would know that name. And it reads, "It's one of the most beautiful compensations in life that no one can sincerely try to help another without helping himself." So the more you help others, you are, in effect, helping yourself as well. So we've discussed that, I think, earlier.
No, I think it's an important point too, even in the reverse of that, around, you know, the analogy of, you know, the oxygen mask falling, you know, in the plane. You know, you've got to put your own on first before you can help others. And quite often, you know, we think just endlessly helping others and neglecting ourselves is okay, but it's not. You've got to be okay to be okay for others. Now, Ken, I recently, I've just spent the last month travelling around Australia and New Zealand, going out into the field talking to men.
You spoke about that earlier.
About their mental health and their health in general and anything else that they want to talk about. And I think probably there was about 1,000 men I had the privilege of addressing, and in about 21 presentations. And, you know, really, really simple messages like we're sharing today about, you know, connection, about having conversations with each other, about, do you know what, just being kind, just being caring, not being a beep, has so much power. And I know for a fact through the data that we collected during that roadshow that at least 5 lives were saved, which is, you know, that's just amazing to think that 5 people were ready to die and didn't. So that's the power of just connecting with people, not doing anything particularly fancy, just opening your mouth and giving a shit, really caring. So, you know, I think that's a message that I would love to sort of really, really instill today. Just be kind. Just care. When you pick up the phone, smile, because it has an effect on the person at the other end. Simple.
That's very true.
I may have mentioned this. No, I didn't mention this in my last show because it only happened recently, but I was coming home one evening and it was raining and I had to go to the supermarket, and I jumped out of the car. I thought, oh, I don't mind getting wet, you know, it doesn't really bother me. So I'm sort of walking into the supermarket, and then there was a woman just standing in front of me as I was walking, and she had an umbrella, and as I walked past, she pulled me in under the umbrella and she said, my umbrella has room for 2. And then we walked maybe for 100 metres together and had a very small conversation, and I thanked her. I said, thank you, that you have no idea the impact of your gesture. And she said it was nothing. And I said, again, you have no idea how much that means. Really simple stuff, guys.
I'm glad you said that to her, because that would have gone into her brain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So a bit of oxytocin, you know, shared with each other is a nice thing, because that's what happens when we're kind to people and they're kind back, or we really listen to people. Those, you know, those happiness hormones, your serotonin, your dopamine, your oxytocin, it all gets ignited, and it gives us that's what gives us that good feeling.
Yeah, it happens too when you get phone calls requesting something, you know, like a phone call to donate to a charity of some sort, something like that. A lot of people just slam the receiver down. And I think that's very wrong. I think the person is doing it for a reason. The person is doing it to help somebody else, probably, or to even for their business.
Well, they're not taking, you know, funds from the government. They're going out there and, you know, performing a duty that, you know, that's sustaining them. So, yeah, you're right.
It's so easy to say, look, I'm sorry, I'm not interested, but thank you for calling.
And then slam the phone down.
That's it. But very few do that. They're rude and get off the line, or don't waste their time, or something.
So that has an impact on the human condition. So, yeah, you're right, Ken. Good point. Anyone that does that, or that stupid joke where you just leave your phone off the hook and just walk away, it's not funny, because you don't know what's on the other end of the phone. Just be kind. Say thank you very much, but no thank you.
Well, I hope we get that message through.
Yes,
Very
definitely.
much so, because
Definitely.
I think that's important, you know.
Yeah.
A lot of people are doing it to earn a living.
Yes.
And to be able to feed their children.
Yep, or themselves. Now, speaking of activities, tell me about the Olympics. Tell me about the Olympics.
Yes, well, where I live in a retirement village,
It's actually not a retirement village. It's like the grandest palatial place that you could ever imagine. It's pretty
palatial.
Pretty snazzy.
On a clear day, you can see the windows. But it's just we have actually a series of. We have one day put aside for a day of Olympics, in which case I think it was about 8 to 10 different skills.
So who organised this, Ken?
This was done by the committee that are sort of volunteers amongst the people that live there.
Are you one of those?
And I think probably a lot to do with because we have a gymnasium and physiotherapists and all that. So they all got together and they put this series together. And I think it went very well. It did for me.
Well, didn't you sweep the pool for all the golds? Didn't you get all the golds?
I got 4 gold medals here and 3 silvers as well.
Yeah.
So I cleaned up the pool. Mind you, it's mainly put together for people between the ages probably of 45 to whatever.
98, perhaps?
98, yes, that's right. I think I was the oldest, yeah. So that was good. And they were simple things, but they were good. Oh, not all simple. One of them was lifting weights off the floor.
I've posted that picture on Facebook. You look like you were lifting quite a bit of weight there.
Oh, no, I didn't know you did that.
The green one. Yeah, I did. You'll have to check it out. I'll show you later anyway.
What else was there? I haven't got a list in front of me now. I've forgotten what I did. But I think it was throwing a basketball into a bin, which was, say, a couple of metres away from you.
Yeah.
Now, it looked easy, but it wasn't. Just to get it into the right height, the right position and everything else. There was a running race in the pool. Running in water is not easy.
No.
I didn't see the result of that, incidentally.
Did you not win that one?
I didn't do it.
Oh,
no.
right, okay.
And there was quite a few other little things to do that was within the range of the people of that age group. And it was exciting. Everyone had fun. They sort of treated it like it was a day of fun, which it was, but it also had a very strong message of start moving around, start doing exercises and start keeping well and getting better from whatever they're suffering. Because quite a few of them are in wheelchairs and they got out of their wheelchairs and they walked. Not far, but they did. And all this was because it got them as one of the crowd and they didn't feel isolated.
Yeah.
So it was, the whole thing went very well, and we had a break and we had all sorts of nice goodies, tea and coffee and various other little things just to keep us happy, I think.
Well, tell me about that.
And then we didn't actually have medals. We did have a little bag each of all sorts of things. And so the whole thing went so well, so they decided, I think, that it will be continued once every year, and that the standards that were reached, because the physios made sure that it was written down that each one that took part had a record of their exact exercise and how long it took them and what was involved and everything else. So it had a double shot. One of them is to have a good time and meet new friends, and the other was that for their medical records and things, it would be good for them.
So tell me, in the lead up to it, because I know that when I was speaking to you in the weeks leading up to the Olympics, you were starting to get quite excited, a little bit nervous. What was the vibe like at the Classic?
What on that day? Do you mean?
I'm trying to grab a picture of when we do something that seems quite small. It's a day of Olympics, but what that does for the environment of the community of people in terms of building purpose, building excitement, those kinds of things.
It does a lot. It does a lot, and certainly it did. it did have good effects, although a lot of people didn't realise what was involved, so they didn't put their names down. But I think now, next time, they'll get a much bigger number doing it, and also helping the vibe get more vibe.
Yes. Because
So
it's
I think
quite,
it's going to be a really good show next time.
yeah, because I was talking before about our happiness hormones, oxytocin and our serotonin and dopamine and endorphins. Exercise, the way that it activates those kinds of things.
Yeah, you're right. And you mentioned something there because we're talking about people think to get well and to keep well, you've got to go into the pharmacy and you've got to buy all these different, vitamins A, D, L, O, V and E and all those things. The thing is, you're wasting your money because what you should be doing is that, and I mentioned it earlier, is to go and have a checkup, find out what you're short of. It's no good buying a whole lot of vitamins if you really don't need them.
No.
And if you were to get because they're on special, you're going to get vitamin C, 500 milligram. And you'll probably find that when you've done your checkup, that you don't need any vitamin C.
Well, but also there's a big danger in over-medicating on vitamins as well. It can be very detrimental to your organs, your liver, your kidneys, because, as you said, Ken, if you don't need it, then your body's got to try and get rid of it.
Of course.
And you can actually get poisoning from too much iron, can't you?
Yes, very much so.
So Ken's right. Go and get a regular blood test. And even for women and men, as we go through stages of life, women, for example, often overlook menopause. Don't realise that perimenopause can start happening, as early as in your early 40s, and experiencing symptoms that we just put up with. And, just pop to your doctor, get some hormone level tests. The same with men as well, because sometimes how we're feeling can be directly related to a hormonal imbalance. And another thing that I want to mention as well, especially in the lead up to the silly season, is alcohol. Now, a person asked me out in the field the other week about depression diagnosis. How do we diagnose depression? And I said it's really interesting because I've been doing a lot of research around alcohol. Now, as soon as you consume alcohol, it completely depletes all of those happiness hormones. So the serotonin, the oxytocin, the dopamine, all the things that make us feel happy and sense of well-being, all of a sudden get taken away by alcohol. Alcohol just takes it. So that feeling of depression, because you have none of these happiness hormones, that's not about depression. That's about alcohol consumption. So I think that there's a lot of misdiagnosis around depression because, Australia's drinking culture is atrocious. I drink. I try not to. I try to have periods where I don't at all. But it's so difficult not to. Like, even this wedding I went to last night, lots of alcohol, and I was driving, so I wasn't drinking. So I fortunately, didn't. I had a reason not to. But people still ask you why you're not drinking. Why aren't you drinking? Are you okay? What's wrong with you? And I can say I'm driving, so that's a reason. But even then, it's sort of like, well, why did you drive?
Yeah, you're quite right. I mean, it's very silly, but then again, people don't think. They don't think that they're doing harm, and they're stopping from good things happening as well.
Well, but because of the whole social element of alcohol, we firmly believe we've got it hardwired into our brains that it's about celebrating, it's about feeling good, it's about relaxing, it's about, it's painted in that picture all the time by the media.
Of course.
Whereas in fact, you're just ingesting poison. That's it. That's the bottom line. And I'm not being like an anti-drinking advocate because, again, I love it more than anyone else. But, I guess I'm sort of just really, really trying to be very mindful about how I consume. And I would much prefer not to at all. I would love to not drink at all.
It's deadly silence.
I know. I love the silence.
Well, yes, I I must admit that I was drinking when I was working in England. The temptation is when you finish work, you go down to the local pub, and mainly to socialise. But drinks come into it because you don't want to stand there with no glass in your hand when everyone else is. So this is, it creates an environment like your wedding.
Yes.
It's an environment of excitement, and you feel this is all part of it.
Yeah.
But certainly not from a health point of view. It's not part of it.
That's right.
It's what you decide yourself.
That's right. But there really is, at the end of the day, do your research, kids. There's a lot of it out there now. There's a lot of big sober communities that are popping up all over the world. And when you really do the research to see what it all means, it's very interesting and quite astounding. But Ken, we've come to the end of the show.
Oh, we can't do that without a quote.
Well, I just need to say that coming up is, I'm assuming it's Paula Hogg for her very lazy Sunday afternoon. The monitor into Studio 1 is not on, so I can't see if she's in the studio yet, but normally she sticks her head in. But before you do read your quote, Ken, I'll be returning to 3WBC on Sunday the 18th of December with yet another amazing guest in the lead up to Christmas. But I wanted to thank you so much for coming on today. I know it's a big thing to get here and spend 2 hours on the air and, impart lots of pieces of you that are, quite private and personal. And I'm pretty sure that what you've spoken about today will have a huge impact on our audience because, you're certainly, as I said earlier in the show, a man of such wisdom and experience, and you're also very entertaining to boot.
You're very kind and very perceptive in many ways, and I do hope the listeners gained a lot from today, from the simple things that we talk about have very important endings.
Yep. So you've got.
I'm just looking for the quote that I had here. Albert Einstein, probably one of the best known.
Who's he?
Of his.
Who's she?
Time. Yes, I'll tell you later. This is a beautiful quote, I think. It's Albert. Try not to become, this is a man, this is advice to you gentlemen listening in, not watching, you can't see us.
Oh, well, we can
but
try.
Certainly this is good advice, in my opinion, from Albert Einstein. Try not to become a man of success, but rather become a man of value.
Oh, that's really good, Ken.
That's good, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really good.
And so that's what I thought would be a good lasting one to finish my little bit on the program. So there you are. So thank you for listening. And I'll hand back to Rae to finish our get-together today.
Well, I've got one final song, and it's a song that I picked up quite a few years ago, actually, because you played it on one of your shows and I was listening in, and it sort of took me back in time, and I love it, and I know you do too. It's by Edison Lighthouse, and it's...
Oh, I love it.
And it's... Oh, you do love it, don't you? And it's called Love Grows. So take care, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. Please...